not pick up the phone, because you're probably already holding the phone, but to tap a different spot on the phone to make the phone call, to actually just be a human for 2 seconds and talk to them. Now I get, we don't like making phone calls. I get that. I don't like making phone calls either, but I would feel way worse about initiating one of these, on the back end on my behalf than I would about actually placing that phone call. It's dehumanizing to the people on the other end. It's wasteful of their time. And I think it's a little bit insulting to try to hide the fact that you are a bot calling them. Like, I think that what they should do, if they're going to do this at all, and I'm not sure they should, but if they're going to do this at all, they should begin the call with, a quick way of basically saying what's going on. Basically saying, hi, this is the Google Assistant calling on behalf of John Syracusa. Do you have a reservation for this day? Like, make it very clear, and stop with the fake ums and ums. Like, all that is doing is trying to trick people, and that is not in good faith. That is trying to take advantage of people and try to trick them into playing into your API without being willing participants of that. And that's just kind of sleazy. I don't like that. And if they did it the robotic way, like, or they actually just say what it is and they're upfront about it, that at least is, it's not trying to trick anybody. It is still wasteful of people's time, and I still would feel bad about initiating that call, but I at least wouldn't feel like I was like, I don't know, just like, deceiving people. It's just a weird thing. And there's another feature that I think one of you wants to bring up about calling about holiday hours, where apparently, like, on holidays where hours might be different, they will call the place like once in the morning to see what the hours are, and then they'll just cache those results so that allegedly it saves them from all these phone calls all day. What if they miss that call? What if they misinterpret the results from that call? When you think about the ramifications of before, if the person on the other end of the phone, said the wrong thing once in the morning to one person, it affected one potential customer. Now, if you slip up and say the wrong thing once in the morning, it could affect all your customers that day who would have come there from search. There are ramifications to these kinds of things that really just seem not really that good for the local businesses that are on the other side of this. And it's all of this is to create minor conveniences for lazy tech dudes who can't not just pick up the phone because the phone's already in their hand, but can't literally push one button on the phone to tap that phone number and call them instead. And I think this is a step too far, especially when it involves deception of the person on the other end and potentially wasting their time.
So I want to talk about the technology behind this, because I think that's what Casey's first impression is based on these guys in tech. That's how I like to think about these things and think about how they could find themselves in a position where they're using this technology in this particular way. But first you have to talk about the tech. And the tech they're showing it's obviously, speech to text, because the person on the other end of the phone call says things, and Google Assistant has to figure out what it is they're saying. So it's going to convert their speech into text. Then it has to have some understanding of what it is that they said. And then it also has to have some understanding of what its mission is. I'm going to try to get a reservation for this time for this many people, right? And the parameters of that mission, all the different things, like what if nothing's available, what if they have a particular call where they couldn't reserve a table for that many people, so it has to have that mission and it has to understand what the person says, and then it has to be able to engage in a conversation, a back and forth of saying, you said this, now I say this, and keeping the state of it all in its mind, sort of semantic analysis of when you say that, when you make that sound thing on the other end of the phone, it means these words, and these words mean this actual, message or meaning, and that applies to what we've said in the past in this way. That's the tech that they're trying to show there. And researching and developing that tech, I think, is really important, a really important area of research, because if you can do that better than we currently can by some appreciable degree, many interesting opportunities come up. Like if I told you that even if it's for a very narrow domain, like making an appointment or something like that, whatever, pick the narrow domain that you're choosing. If I told you I could get a computer to understand meaning behind things that you say and to engage you in a conversation to accomplish a goal. If you've been listening to me talk about cylinders on the show for a long time, it's been my push on the past several months worth of shows when we've been talking about HomePod and everything, that I want to engage my cylinder in a conversation and work towards a goal, right? It's the same exact tech, only the difference here is I'm initiating the conversation. I know I'm talking to a cylinder because it's in my own house and it's sitting right there. There's no deception involved, and I would find that interaction better than having to initiate a series of commands or make a macro for myself or know a particular syntax or whatever. And even just within the realm of the things that cylinders are supposed to already do, to be able to have the extra smarts on display here, to understand nuances of speech and to understand like the overall mission of what I'm trying to accomplish and to help me refine it and narrow it and to be helpful. That technology is incredibly important and should be developed. And so I applaud Google for doing that. This, of all the places where this technology could be applied, I would not have even predicted that this would be where because they have a thing called Google Assistant that is just like this. There's a cylinder in my house with Google Assistant on it. They have phones. Like, isn't that the first most obvious application of that? Anyway, but setting that aside, the second aspect related to the application that they are showing here, which is, we're going to make a phone call for you behind the scenes, which, by the way, you don't get to hear this phone call. You just talk to the assistant and it says, okay, I'll make that reservation for you, and then you just wait, and in the background it's having a phone call that you don't get to hear and don't participate in any way, right? And then it comes back to you and says, yeah, I totally made that reservation for you. In that particular application of this technology, the pitch is that you don't have to be involved with this. Don't worry about the details, but Google Assistant will handle it. And all of the things that Marco was talking about, how deceptive it is and how disrespectful it is to the person at the other end, and how it isn't that hard to think of a much more respectful way to do this, like by pre-announcing yourself and so on and so forth. But that's not what they chose to do. That they're really leaning on the fact that they can, fake you out by pretending to be human. Which, by the way, I think there still are in the uncanny valley. You can tell these things are not quite human. Just they're still in the uncanny valley. It's not totally human. It's way better than it was before.
Like even in the canned demo they did, it like the way when it asked for noon and it said we don't have anything, and like the way that the assistant like re-asked,
yeah,
do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. Like no one talks like that. Like this is your demo. This is your canned demo. Like it's obviously like almost any response you get from a human being has a pretty high chance of not being of like being some kind of like slightly exceptional condition or things that require more explanation, that the Google Assistant will respond in some way that makes it clear like either this is a really weird person or this is not a person.
Yeah, it definitely seems very unlike a person. And that leads me to my next point about this tech. It's the same point I made about self-driving cars in the past. And it also is related to the deception angle here. This thing, no matter how good it is, no matter how long it's in beta, it's going to fall over a lot. And when it does, because it's a really hard problem, like you will be trivially easy to be able to stump this thing and to have it start saying nonsensical computery things that are not related to what you say, that are to the point where the person would hang up on it, right? Because everyone sees this demo and it's like, it's HAL 9000, we're there. It's like, you are not there. Like, that last 10%, just like self-driving cars, the level 5 automation, right? That last little bit, that's a mountain that's way bigger than you think it is, right? And so even though it seems like we're right around the corner, and it's like, Moore's Law, we'll be there in 2 seconds, it's way harder than you think. And so if you start off this conversation with the deception, like if that's your goal, it will be 100 times worse when the thing falls on its face. And it will fall on its face a lot. And from the business's perspective, obviously, ideally they would all have actual APIs and not humans, but if they don't want to do that, from the business's perspective, they want your business. They want this reservation. If you pre-announced and said, this is the Google Assistant, I'm a computer acting on behalf of a person, blah, 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 after the first 4 or 5 calls of that type, the person on the other end would know how to most efficiently deal with this stupid computer thing to get the reservation, because they want the reservation, they want the money. Right, it's the whole reason people set up like with all these apps and everything, right? And maybe it will motivate them to get on one of these apps to not have to deal with these stupid computer phone calls. But it's better than not getting a reservation at all, right? But if the thing's going to fall over, like phone trees, like when you call the support thing, we all know they're phone trees, and we all know their various failure modes by this point, and we know how to navigate them efficiently. I would much rather have that than something that tries to fool me into thinking it's human, but then like goes berserk, and now I have to go, I wasted all this time talking to you like a human when I should have just been playing you like a video game to get to the point where we make the reservation. Like, let me, a text adventure all over again. I don't, even if people see this and they think this is a great feature and it has important applicability in my life, because that's another point on this, that some of the comments I pulled out here, like, there are places where this exact feature is actually really important for people who literally can't make that reservation themselves and do want to appear as human as possible, right? There's an accessibility angle to this. But even in those situations, even in the most optimistic scenario, my advice to anyone watching this is do not expect this to work even as well as it did in that all the time, because it won't. Like, it will work. And, it doesn't always work with humans. Sometimes it's difficult for humans to make a reservation. Sometimes you can't hear anything in the restaurant. Sometimes people are ornery. Sometimes they hang up on you. Sometimes you lose your cell signal, right? But the success rate of this thing is going to be way lower than people think it is. We are a long way off from, even with limited domain, we are a long way off from passing the Turing test. Now, it doesn't mean your reservation is not going to be a success, because once the other person on the other end figures out that it's a computer, they'll play the little game and they'll get the reservation because they want the sale, right? But don't get starry-eyed about how amazing. I mean, it is an amazing leap from anything that we may have seen before, but it is still so far from whatever the equivalent of level 5 self-driving automation is for having a conversation with a human. Even within a limited domain, because humans are inscrutable and it's really difficult to... You just can't account for everything that they're going to say and do. You can't account for all the nuances. It's like, the reason they work at all is because when the computer acts like a pig-headed computer, the person eventually, best case, reverts to thinking this is just a pig-headed person who's not listening to what I say, and like they just have a one-track mind and they just want to make this reservation, and they didn't understand what I said back to them because they're not paying attention, or maybe they're driving or something, and then you just roll their eyes. Like, that's the best case scenario. But yeah, if and when they actually launch this, I can't wait to see all of the conversations that people manage to get this thing into, where it just goes completely off the rails, because it's a hard problem, and that's why we're all so impressed by it. It's such a hard problem. It's like, I didn't even know we were this far along. We're within striking distance, and I think that we are not within striking distance.
I mean, you can even just picture, what if the person on the other end has follow-up questions? Okay, you want a reservation? Where? What part of the restaurant? Mm-hmm. It's simple things like that. Or do you want a table outside or inside? Or like, if you're ordering a pizza. Oh, do you want a medium or a large?
The most misguided one was when he's, obviously it's forward-looking. This was Sundar Pichai was the person doing the thing, I think.
I don't know.
Anyway, the presenter said, we don't have a lot of time, so maybe like your kid is sick, and you need to make a doctor's appointment for them. Like, have you ever made a doctor's appointment for a sick kid? That conversation involves a lot of questions about what's wrong with your kid, and did you take their temperature, and how are they feeling, and when's the last time they threw up, and but like, no computer is... hell, I get on that call, and I feel like I have to have, like, information ready, like, to be like, when's the last time they came in, when's this, but, like, there is no way I would let a computer make that call. I barely think I myself am competent to make that call, right? Maybe I would let them make the call to the school to tell them that they're not going to be in that day, but really the schools just have a website where you can click something, because that's stupid. But, like... Yeah, that was the wrong example. Ordering food, making a reservation, something with a business transaction where the person on the other end is motivated to deal with my crap, computerized crap or otherwise, because I'm sure those people deal with people crap all the time too. People being rude when they make reservations, just generally being inscrutable, right? They're motivated at least to do that, but like, my doctor is not motivated to listen to my computer. My doctor, like whoever answers the desk, has a ton of questions about my kid, very specific questions, to determine whether you should even come in. Oh, we don't take pink eye in the office, you should do this and that, and what do you want to do, and what pharmacy is near. Like, no way a computer can handle that. So I think they're I hesitate to say their heart is in the right place. I actually think it is. I think their heart is in the right place in terms of doing this research and having the overall goal of trying to help people. But the way they're going about it baffles me, because like I said, they have a cylinder that they sell you that I would love to talk to in this way. They would not involve deception at all. And if my cylinder could talk to me like this within the limited domain of music or appointments or whatever, it would be an amazing advance of how I talked to my cylinder today. But they didn't demo that. They demoed it making phone calls for you, which just boggles my mind.
I think this is, to my eyes, a very good example of just because we can doesn't mean we should. Which is basically the summary of all of Silicon Valley, in my personal opinion. Like, it's so obvious. Like, after I saw the technology, which again I cannot stress enough, I think the technology is amazing. And like you said, which is what I was going to bring up, there is an accessibility angle wherein I think this is more reasonable. Like, if I am mute, if I literally cannot talk on the phone.
Yeah, or if you have a speech impediment, or if you have, say, like maybe you have to call a place where you don't speak their language very well, or you have a thick accent that's sometimes misunderstood a lot. Like, there's lots of accessibility reasons for this kind of technology.
But sheer laziness is not it.
But the application would be different there. You'd be speaking through it. You would want to be in on the conversation. In other words, you wouldn't want it to go off and do it completely on its own. You would want to be, like, in most situations where someone has a synthetic voice speaking for them, they don't want to leave the room when it's happening. Like, if they can be there and see your face or hear you or hear the other end of the conversation or monitor it or otherwise nudge it in the right direction, like, they want to be some kind of participant and not just like, set it sail and just let the computer do what it's going to do. Like, and getting to cases like just because you can doesn't mean you should. Like, it's more subtle than that, because they can and should develop this technology, but it's exactly how you choose to apply it. And the subtle difference between what they demoed and talking to your cylinder, which seemed like isn't that the same thing? It's a human talking to a computer, having this conversation. But the difference is subtle, and it's telling that this is how they chose to show this off. Maybe because it's seemingly the most impressive, but it is the most ill-conceived. And I don't even think, like, I say it's ill-conceived just because of the world we live in now. It could be, as many have pointed out, that, like, once this genie's out of the bottle, we will deal with it the same way we deal with those stupid phone trees, which we could have had the same exact conversation about, because they have a lot of the same problems. It's disrespectful to the caller. Sometimes you get tricked into thinking it's human, but eventually we just all get used to it. We get used to the disrespect. We all learn to very quickly pick up on the cues of whether this is a pre-recorded human's voice or not, right? Despite no matter how they try to fool us, and they do try to fool you on those stupid phone trees sometimes, we just all get used to it and we accept it. And I fully expect that if this turns out to be popular, this could totally happen with that technology as well. But I still maintain that if you have this technology and are advancing it, this is not the most bang for your buck. There are better ways to apply this technology that will be more useful and more helpful to more people than this specific detailed implementation. Even for the accessibility angle, most people would want to probably identify themselves as, I'm speaking through this thing, right? Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. But it seems like that when things fall apart, you'd want there to be some kind of explanation. Like, if you see someone in person and they're using an assistive device to talk to you, you understand what the deal is, and you can accommodate that, right? But if you think you're just talking to a regular person and don't realize it's someone who has to use this to communicate with you, have some sort of allowance to that, I think that would help as well. So, I'm not even going to go so far as to say that this is a way that this technology should never be used. I'm willing to believe that this is a way this technology will be used, that when we're all 80, it will be so boring that no one will even talk about it anymore. But right here and now, I'm going to say, like, there are richer veins to be mined than this.
Can you imagine if it was Siri making these calls? It'd be like, hi, can I have an appointment between 10 and noon? And the other person's like, sure, I have one at 10. And Siri would be like, what do you want to convert 10 to?
Right, thinking. Ask again later.
I found this on the internet for you. I don't know. It's just, it's so tough because I can't stress enough. My initial reaction was so overwhelmingly positive, but then the moment I really started thinking about this, I was like, oh, this is kind of creepy. And I don't know. I maybe it's just me, but I feel like this is just Silicon Valley in a nutshell. Like, it's a bunch of people, probably dudes, probably entitled dudes, just thinking, you know what, I really just don't want to be bothered making a reservation. Like, I'm too good for that. My time is too valuable. So what can I do? I can use the whole of human technology to fake something that sounds like a human to make that reservation for me. It's just...
See, I can see where you'd come away with that on this, but I really think that there is actually a little kernel of the 70s era Silicon Valley idealism in this as well. Perhaps a naive idealism, which is also part of it. But, and like it was phrased as saving you time, and you can say, okay, it's got to save you time because you're so important. Your time is so valuable because you're, a rich tech nerd. But first of all, this technology is not exclusively available to rich people.
Sure, fair point.
Android is very democratizing technology. It's available on cheapo phones everywhere. A lot of it happens on the servers. You don't need to have an expensive device. And the way it was framed for the most part was, we're trying to help people with their lives. People have challenges in their lives. Everybody does. And we want to help them solve the problems they have. Whether this is, the biggest problem or the way people would want it to be solved, that was the stated motivation. Andy Ihnatko had a very optimistic take on this when he was tweeting it in real time. And he kept coming back to the message that Google was sending out throughout the presentation. As, not directly most of the time, but more or less indirectly contrasting themselves with Facebook. Basically, this is Andy interpreting what they're saying. It's like they, meaning Google, are trying to say, Facebook uses its power to abuse your privacy and exploit you and undermine institutions. We use our power, we meaning Google, to help you and improve your life. And that was the message. Use Google products because you have challenges in your lives, and Google products will help you overcome them. And again, I see the elite angle on there, but I think the populist sort of techno-optimism of, we take amazing technology, make it available to everybody for free or cheap, and it helps them with their lives, is a very sort of 70s Silicon Valley bicycle for the mind, personal computer on every desk, utopian philosophy. Again, perhaps naive, but I think, like I said, the heart is in the right place for this type of thing. There are other aspects of the presentation I'll probably talk about next week, like the digital well-being stuff. What was the other thing? Like the developing on Chromebooks, the whole Chromebook angle too, why they even do that. They have these cheapo computers. Like I mostly give Google the benefit of the doubt on this front, especially because, especially because it is less clearly tied to advertising. It's still tied to commerce, right? But it's less clearly tied to, this is a way for us to show you more ads, right? I mean, it's a way to gather more information about you so they can show you more ads. But anyway, I really believe the people working on this project think that the technology they're developing, the ability of a computer to understand and engage in a conversation in a little limited problem domain, can help humanity. I believe it can help humanity. Just I'm not sure they've figured out quite how yet.
We are sponsored this week by Eero. Finally, Wi-Fi that works. We all know that one Wi-Fi router does not cover most places very well, because there's things like walls that no matter how many antennas you put on your router, there's going to be like small dead zones or rooms where it just doesn't reach, or the very edge of your yard where you have a smart bulb that you really want it to reach, but it just doesn't. What you need is a distributed system that broadcasts Wi-Fi from multiple physical points in a big mesh. Now, this is what schools and businesses and things have used for years, but they have to use, expensive and hard to administer enterprise stuff. Eero brings enterprise-grade hardware and features to consumers in an incredibly easy-to-use package. It's the easiest setup I've ever seen of any router, let alone a mesh system. It's incredibly easy. You launch the Eero app, it sets you through the whole thing. You start out with the Eero base station. You connect that the same way you connect any other router. You connect it to your internet connection. Then you plug in the Eero beacons that you have, the additional Eero beacons, and these are going to communicate with that base station and broadcast a nice mesh of Wi-Fi all around your house. The app will help you place the beacons in effective locations. You can measure their speed to make sure you're putting them in places where they're actually going to work and not like stepping on each other's toes or anything. And your experience is seamless. You walk around your house, you only see one network, and it just covers everything. It's wonderful. And again, I can't stress how easy it is to use. If you need any help, they do have great support as well, but I have a feeling you won't need it. So see for yourself how easy Eero is. I've never seen an easier system to set up for Wi-Fi, and it works really well. For free overnight shipping to the US and Canada, visit Eero.com, select overnight shipping, and then enter promo code ATP to make that shipping free. Once again, visit Eero.com, that's EERO.com. And at checkout, select overnight shipping, then enter promo code ATP to make it free to the US or Canada. Thank you so much to Eero for sponsoring our show. So this past week was the 20th anniversary of the original iMac. And lots of our friends in the Apple and writing world have given wonderful retrospectives, and lots of our podcasting friends have had lots of great talks about it. When the iMac came out in 1998, right? Yeah, I was still a PC person. I mostly ignored it. Like, I ignored almost everything Apple did back then because I was a PC person. But I do want to talk about one part of the iMac that did have a lot to do with the PC world because we shared it with them. I want to have retrospective. Instead about the iMac, my retrospective is about USB and quite how much USB changed the world. Back then, like, it was like this new port, and it was hyped, and it was, everything that any new technology product got back then, standard level of hype. But I didn't fully realize, like, until a few years in, quite how